8 men, 8 guns, one narrow street in East Harlem. The black Cadillac couldn't move forward, couldn't reverse, couldn't turn around. It was 11:34 p.m., March 8, 1959. The streetlights on 118th Street had been shot out 20 minutes earlier. The only light came from the headlights of 2 cars blocking both ends of the street. Inside the Cadillac, Illinois Gordon gripped the steering wheel. In the back seat, Bumpy Johnson sat perfectly still. "Boss," Illinois said quietly, "we're boxed in." Bumpy didn't respond. He was looking at the window at the 8 men standing in the darkness, 4 in front, 4 behind, all of them holding weapons. This was a kill box, professionally set up, carefully planned, the kind of ambush that didn't leave survivors. Illinois' hand moved toward the glove compartment, where he kept a .45 automatic. "Don't," Bumpy said. "Boss, we got—" "I said don't." Bumpy reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a leather cigar case, opened it slowly, selected a Cuban cigar, closed the case, put it back in his pocket. Then he opened the car door and stepped out into the street. Illinois' eyes went wide. Bumpy! But Bumpy was already standing in the middle of 118th Street, surrounded by 8 armed men, completely exposed. He reached into his other pocket, pulled out a silver lighter, and lit his cigar. The 8 men stood frozen, guns raised, fingers on triggers, waiting for orders that hadn't come yet, because nobody had expected this. Nobody had expected Bumpy Johnson to step out of the car like he was arriving at a social club. Bumpy took a long, slow drag from the cigar. The tip glowed orange in the darkness. Then he looked at the man standing directly in front of him, the leader, tall, mid-30s, wearing an expensive coat. "You're Vincent Calabresi's crew." Not a question, a statement. The man didn't respond. "I'm going to finish this cigar. It's a Romeo and Juliet at Churchill. Takes about 20 minutes to smoke properly, maybe 25 if I take my time." He took another drag. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand there and wait while I smoke, and when I'm done, we're going to have a conversation about why you thought ambushing me was a good idea." One of the men behind the Cadillac spoke up. "You think you're in a position to—" "I'm not in a position. You are." The street went silent. Bumpy took another drag from his cigar, blew smoke into the cold March air. "See, you boys made a mistake tonight. You set up a good ambush, professional work, but you forgot something important." He gestured with the cigar at the buildings around them. "This is Harlem, my Harlem, and right now 40 people are watching from these windows. They saw you shoot out the streetlights. They saw you block the street. They know exactly what you're trying to do." Bumpy smiled slightly.
"So if you shoot me, you'll have about 3 minutes before this entire neighborhood comes down on you like the wrath of God." The leader of the crew shifted his weight nervously. "But more importantly," Bumpy continued, "Vincent didn't send you here to kill me. He sent you to scare me, to send a message. Because if Vincent wanted me dead, he would have come himself." Bumpy took another slow drag. "So I'm going to finish my cigar, and you're going to wait. Because the moment you pull those triggers, everything changes, and I don't think you're ready for what comes next." To understand why 8 armed men stood in the middle of 118th Street for 20 minutes watching Bumpy Johnson smoke a cigar, you need to understand what had happened 3 days earlier. March 5, 1959. Vincent Calabrese was a rising enforcer in the Genovese crime family's East Harlem operations. 38 years old, ambitious, and convinced he was smarter than the old guard. For 6 months, Vincent had been expanding his gambling operations into territory that bordered Bumpy's network. Small moves at first, a card game here, a betting window there. Bumpy had ignored it. But then Vincent made a mistake. He opened a policy bank on 125th Street, right in the heart of Bumpy's territory, and he did it without asking permission.
The policy bank had been running for 2 weeks when Bumpy finally sent Illinois Gordon with a message. Mr. Johnson says you're operating in his territory without permission. He'd like to discuss terms. Vincent's response was simple. Tell Bumpy Johnson the old days are over. Tell him East Harlem belongs to the Italians now, and if he's got a problem with that, he knows where to find me. Illinois brought the message back to Bumpy. Bumpy listened quietly. Then he said, set up a meeting with Vincent, neutral ground, Wednesday night. But Vincent had other plans. He'd heard about the meeting request, and he decided that instead of negotiating with Bumpy, he'd send a different kind of message, an ambush. Kill Bumpy Johnson in the street, show everyone that the old guard was finished, that Vincent Calabrese was the new power in East Harlem. Vincent spent 2 days planning it, found the perfect location, 118th Street, narrow, easy to block, far enough from Bumpy's usual territory that he wouldn't expect trouble. Vincent knew Bumpy's routine, knew he'd be driving back from a Thursday night card game in the Bronx, knew he'd take 118th Street as a shortcut. Everything was set, except Vincent made one critical miscalculation. He assumed Bumpy Johnson would react like a normal person when trapped in a kill box, would panic, would try to fight, would try to run. Vincent had 8 men ready to shoot the moment Bumpy showed any sign of resistance. But Bumpy didn't fight, didn't run. He stepped out of the car and lit a cigar. 11:36. Bumpy had been smoking for 2 minutes. The 8 men were still standing there, guns raised, completely unsure what to do. The leader, a man named Tony Greco, finally spoke. You think this is funny? Bumpy looked at him. Not particularly, but it's interesting. Interesting. You're standing in the middle of Harlem with 8 guns pointed at one man, but you haven't pulled the trigger, which means you're waiting for something. Permission, maybe. Courage, possibly. Tony's jaw tightened. We're waiting for you to... To what? Bumpy interrupted. To beg? To run? To give you an excuse to shoot? He took another drag from the cigar. Here's what I think is happening. Vincent sent you here to kill me, but he didn't give you clear orders. He said something like, handle it, or send a message, or make him understand. Am I right? Tony didn't answer. So now you're standing here trying to figure out if handle it means kill him or scare him. Because if you kill me, and Vincent didn't explicitly order it, you just started a war that Vincent might not want. Bumpy smiled. But if you don't kill me, you look weak, and Vincent will think you failed. He gestured with the cigar. That's a difficult position to be in. Behind the Cadillac, one of the younger crew members shifted nervously. Tony, we should just... Shut up, Tony snapped. Bumpy checked his watch. 4 minutes down, about 16 to go. From inside the Cadillac, Illinois was watching through the window, his hands still on the .45 in the glove compartment. He'd been with Bumpy for 15 years, had seen him talk his way out of impossible situations before, but this was different. This was 8 armed men in the dark. One wrong word, and they'd all start shooting. Illinois looked at the buildings around them. Bumpy was right. Lights were on in windows. People were watching. But would they help? Would they call the police? Would they do anything except watch? 11:42 p.m. 8 minutes had passed. Bumpy was halfway through his cigar. Tony Greco was getting more agitated. His crew was looking at each other, silently asking the same question. What are we doing? You know what your real problem is? Bumpy said conversationally. Tony didn't respond. Your problem is that Vincent sent you to do a job without thinking it through. He wanted to make a statement, show everyone he's not afraid of Bumpy Johnson, but he didn't consider what happens after. Bumpy took another drag. Let's say you shoot me right now. Let's say all 8 of you empty your guns and I die right here in the street. What happens next? Tony's grip on his weapon tightened.
First, Bumpy continued, 40 witnesses call the police. NYPD arrives in about 6 minutes. You've got to get out of Harlem before that happens. But your cars are blocking the street, so you've got to move them, get everyone loaded up, and drive out through a neighborhood that's now fully awake and angry. He paused. You might make it. Probably not. But let's say you do. Then what? Bumpy asked. You go back to Vincent and tell him you killed Bumpy Johnson, and Vincent celebrates for maybe an hour. Then he starts thinking about what I have, my network, my connections, my operations, and he realizes none of that transfers to him just because I'm dead. Bumpy pointed with his cigar toward the darkness beyond the streetlights. My people don't work for Vincent, they work for me, and when I'm gone, they don't fold, they retaliate. Every single person in my organization, and there are more than you think, comes after Vincent Calabres and everyone connected to him. Tony's face had gone pale. So Vincent gets what he wants. He gets to say he killed Bumpy Johnson, and then he spends the next year fighting a war that costs him everything. 11:48 p.m. 12 minutes had passed. The cigar was 3/4 finished, and Tony Greco was starting to understand that he'd been sent on a suicide mission. Here's what I think really happened, Bumpy said. Vincent is ambitious. He wants to expand. He sees my territory and thinks that should be mine, but he's not stupid enough to start a full war, so he sent you to scare me, to show me he's serious. Bumpy took another drag. But you got here and realized that scaring me isn't enough, so you thought maybe you'd kill me, make a real statement. Except now you're standing here realizing that killing me is the worst decision you could possibly make. One of the men behind the Cadillac lowered his gun slightly. Tony noticed. Keep your weapon up. Tony, the man said quietly, he's right. We shoot him, we're starting something we can't finish. I gave you an order, and I'm telling you it's a bad order. Tony spun toward his crew member, rage on his face. You questioning me? That's when Bumpy spoke again. Quiet, calm. You're losing control of your crew, right here, right now, in front of me. Tony turned back to Bumpy, gun raised. You want to shoot me? Bumpy asked. Go ahead, but know this. The moment you pull that trigger, you've made a choice, and that choice means war. Not just with me, with everyone I'm connected to, every family I've helped, every business I've protected, every cop I've paid. He took a final drag from the cigar. Is Vincent Calabres worth that? The street was silent. 11:54 p.m. 18 minutes had passed. Bumpy looked at his cigar, about 2 inches left. Then he looked at Tony Greco. I'm going to make you an offer. Once. You don't get it again. Tony waited. You and your crew get back in your cars. You drive back to Vincent, and you tell him this. Bumpy Johnson is willing to discuss territory arrangements, but the discussion happens at a table, not in an ambush. Bumpy dropped the cigar to the ground, stepped on it, crushed it under his heel. You've got about 30 seconds to decide. After that, the people in these windows stop watching and start acting. And I promise you, Tony, you don't want to be here when that happens. Tony looked around at his crew. 3 of them had already lowered their weapons. He looked at the windows. Faces in the darkness, dozens of them. He looked back at Bumpy, standing there calmly, hands at his sides, completely unafraid. And Tony Greco made his decision. Lower your weapons, he said quietly. Tony, one of his men started. I said lower them. The 8 guns came down. Bumpy nodded once. Smart choice. Tony gestured to his crew. Get back to the cars. The men started moving, slowly at first, then faster, climbing into the 2 vehicles that were blocking the street. Tony was the last to leave. He stood there for a moment looking at Bumpy. Vincent's not going to like this. Vincent's going to respect it, because now he knows he can't scare me, can't kill me, so the only option left is to negotiate. Tony turned and walked toward his car. The 2 vehicles blocking the street started their engines, pulled forward and back, clearing a path. Within 90 seconds, 118th Street was empty,
except for Bumpy Johnson and the black Cadillac. Bumpy walked back to the car, opened the door, sat down in the back seat. Illinois turned around from the driver's seat, his face pale. "Boss, what the hell just happened?" "They blinked," he said simply. "You stepped out into 8 guns and smoked a cigar for 20 minutes. 19 minutes, Bumpy corrected. It wasn't quite 20. Illinois shook his head. "You're insane."
No, I understood the situation better than they did. How? Bumpy settled back into the seat. They came here to scare me, but you can't scare someone who isn't afraid. So they had 2 choices: escalate to killing, which starts a war they can't win, or back down. I just made backing down look like the smart option. Illinois started the car. "Take me home," Bumpy said. "I need a new cigar." The next morning, Vincent Calabrese received a visitor. Tony Greco walked into Vincent's social club on 116th Street at 9:15 a.m. Vincent was eating breakfast: eggs, toast, coffee. He looked up when Tony entered. "Well," Tony sat down heavily. "We didn't kill him." Vincent set down his fork slowly. "You didn't kill him." "No. I sent you with 8 men, 8 guns, a perfect ambush, and you didn't kill him? Boss, it's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." Tony took a breath. Then he told Vincent everything. The ambush, Bumpy stepping out of the car, the cigar, the 20-minute conversation, the realization that killing Bumpy would start a war Vincent couldn't win. When Tony finished, Vincent was silent for a long time. Then he started laughing. Not angry laughter, genuine amusement. He stepped out of the car and smoked a cigar. Yes, for 20 minutes. 19, actually. He corrected me on that. Vincent shook his head, still smiling. "That's the most arrogant, brilliant thing I've ever heard." "Boss, I'm sorry we didn't—" "Don't apologize," Vincent interrupted. "You made the right call." Tony blinked. "What?" "Bumpy Johnson is right. If you'd killed him, we'd be fighting a war that would destroy both sides. And for what? A few gambling operations?" Vincent picked up his coffee, took a sip. "Set up a meeting, neutral ground. Tell Bumpy I want to discuss territory arrangements." "You're going to negotiate?" "I'm going to be smart. Unlike some people, I know when I'm beat." He looked at Tony. "Bumpy Johnson didn't just outplay you last night. He outplayed me. He turned my ambush into his negotiation. That's a man worth respecting." 2 weeks later, Bumpy Johnson and Vincent Calabrese met at a restaurant in neutral territory. They talked for 3 hours. By the end, they'd worked out an arrangement. Vincent kept his operations in East Harlem. Bumpy kept his territory in Central Harlem. Both agreed not to expand into each other's zones without discussion. The agreement held for 6 years, and every time they met for their quarterly territory reviews, Vincent would bring Bumpy a box of Romeo and Julieta Churchill cigars. "For next time someone tries to ambush you," Vincent would say. Bumpy would smile. There won't be a next time, word got around. And it had. The story of the night Bumpy Johnson stepped out of his car into 8 guns and made his attackers wait 20 minutes while he finished a cigar became legend in New York's underworld. Not because of violence, not because of bloodshed, because Bumpy had understood something fundamental about power. The man who stays calm controls the situation. The man who isn't afraid can't be threatened. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. Just stand there, light a cigar, and wait.